right, we are back putting myself and my safety on the line for another weather wool test. In this one, we're going to talk about fire. In the last video we did water, and specifically freezing water versus wool. And we were able to prove, both by testing myself and then also some somewhat scientific testing with thermometers and hydrometers, that wool will actually increase in temperature when it gets wet.
Warmed up 6.5 degrees Celsius, which is almost 12 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
By taking dry wool, making it wet, we actually increase the temperature. And that could be the difference between hypothermia and not. And that could be the difference between saving your life if you fell through the ice or fell out of a canoe or out of a boat in really cold water. And that warmth that the wool generates when wet, when you need it most, is right at that moment when you're first getting submerged, and that temperature was lasting, I think, up to about half an hour to actually give you that warmth. So that gives you a chance to get to safety, get warmed up, get a fire going, all that kind of stuff. So if you haven't seen those videos, I suggest you check it out. That was really great because we started the conversation, and then customers and people started chiming in, people that are way more qualified than myself or Ralph or Debbie to talk about this stuff, people who work for NASA and the US military. And we've got some incredibly smart customers that are really interested in this kind of stuff as well. And so it's been great to get that conversation going. It's been common knowledge for a long time that wool is a really great fabric. It's probably the best natural material to resist fire and high heat. But the general public has seemed to forgotten a lot of the great benefits of wool. And much of that is due to just the marketing dollars that get spent on synthetic products. And that's due to the markups that they can have, the cost to produce a lot of these synthetic materials, and the ability to mass produce it has generated this crazy amount of consumerism and production that we just can't keep up with in the wool industry. We heard that one of the outdoor brands kind of in our world spends, well, I won't quote the exact number, but they spend way more on Facebook ads alone than our total net income. So we just can't compete with that kind of marketing spend, but we feel like the message is important. So making videos like these is the best way to kind of get the conversation started. And we're really hoping that you guys will help spread the word and share the message. And if not already, wool lovers get into it and get feeling the benefit of it and the comfort of it. And then also some of these really important features that we've demonstrated in the past and that we're demonstrating here today. So what I did is I hit the thrift store and I bought garments that I feel like I know friends and family that wear in situations that are around fires or around fires or high heat. So we've got cotton to start with, a natural fiber, and one that I think is probably better than some of the synthetics, but cotton does burn. If you ever try to light a cotton ball, it goes up real quick. So in order to be as fair as possible, I've got two thicknesses of cotton just to kind of have an average. So I'm going to take a very thick cotton shirt and a very light cotton shirt and then average the results of those. And then I've also got a pair of cotton denim. So I want to kind of see how the weave and the fabric itself plays into the results. Then I've got linen. Linen, something I do really enjoy. I wear a lot of linen, so I wanted to give that an honest test. Then I've got acrylic. Unfortunately, I couldn't find 100% acrylic, but this is a 65% acrylic mixed with some polyester and nylon, I believe. And then I've got 100% nylon. A lot of people wear this kind of stuff as raincoats. My dad wears a puffy vest like this. And then we got polyester. And here again, I've got very different types of materials, 100% polyester. And then lastly, I just couldn't resist the fake fur. So we're going to go through, we're going to do 5 tests, and we're going to give them a rating of 1 to 10. 0 to 10. 0 being complete failure, and 10 being 100% pass. Then we'll total that all up and we'll look at the results over the various tests and determine what's the best fabric to wear around fire. So stick around, we're going to get burned and stuff. Oh, one more thing. If you're going to do something like this on your own, it's important to take proper safety precautions. I have medical staff on site as well as fire extinguishers, a burn blanket, and the other warning that I was given was make sure you wear a proper mask to so you're not bringing in any of these fumes. So hopefully we're doing our best to keep safe and enjoy the show. All right, it's time to start burning stuff. We've got our pyrotechnician here, Dylan. Experiment number 1 is the flame test. So I've just made a little wooden plank here. We're going to drop the fabric over the hole and put the hole over the flame and give it a 10-second count and then look at the results. You ready to get started? Let's do it. Go ahead. Starting. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Pull it off. Let's smother that. That is a fail. Gross. Acrylic, not only did it burn all the way through, but it just shrunk and melted the whole sample. This, these are the same size square, and you can see how much smaller that acrylic just shrunk up. So that's pretty nasty. Starting. Fail. Pull it off. Failed in 6 seconds. Starting. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think it's a fail. Polyester again. These are the same size square. That's what it looks like now. Starting. Fail. Pull it off. Okay. So polyester, zeros across the board. Do not wear polyester near fire. All the polyesters changed shape, not just where the flame was, but they all kind of melted and condensed. So imagine being in high heat and having your garments like shrinking to you. So not even where it's melting, but just the whole thing just kind of suffocating you and melting. Yeah. Starting. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pull it off. So it looks more like it has more nylon in it. Because the nylon melts, but it wasn't supporting its own flame as much. You want to pick away at that a little? See if it... Oh, it did go through. And starting time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pull it off. And let's rest it down. Okay, so it's continuing to smoke. Is it on fire? Okay, so conclusion on the con is that it did not end up supporting its own flame in previous tests that it had, but this one didn't. But it did get very, very brittle, and as soon as you touch that fabric where the flame was, it just crumbled. So that's cotton. Starting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pull it off. Good. Cool. So that caught its own flame pretty bad.
Oh, yeah.
So the thinner cotton obviously didn't perform as good as the thicker cotton. Starting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pull it off. And yeah, flip it over right there. Not bad. Let's see how brittle it is. Whoa, not breaking through at all. So the weave of the denim makes it much stronger than the other cotton shirt that we did. Very impressed by that.
Smoked.
It's smoked, but you know what? Like it's not bad at all. Like I can see, like there's no, I can't, it's no, it's not, and it didn't burn through. When we exposed the indigo side it didn't burn through. When we exposed the inside, it did burn through. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And when I feel it, it makes perfect sense. There's a lot more texture on the side, more room for air and oxygen to get around those fibers, whereas the outside of the denim was very, very smooth and just kind of smothered the flame. So in all cases, we did our best to put the fabric so that the outward side of the fabric would be exposed to the flame. So next fabric is nylon. We've got 2 samples, one that's like a fake down vest, and then one that's like a raincoat material. So let's light them up. Starting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Pull it off. Stop. You can dump it. Just smother it. Oh, it's melted onto, so part of it has melted onto our device here, and this is stuck to the table. That is a gross, gooey mess. Whenever you're ready, action. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pull it off. Dump it over. Oh, it's on flames. So the nylon vest, although it did catch fire, and I believe had been flipped fire side up, would have continued to burn. It did buy it some time. So if you were wearing that vest and you did catch fire, that extra padding would have bought you some time. So I actually didn't fail it with a 0. I gave it a 2 out of 10, simply because it didn't burn through. Starting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Linen was extremely damaged. It completely burnt the full shape all the way through. Look at that. It still has a flame. Really no protection there at all. Again, a very thin piece of fabric. Oh. Not a really fair statement, but okay. Interesting.
It's on fire.
It's on fire. We should probably put that out. So linen burns all the way through. That's a fail, right?
There's a hole in it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's ripping.
And it held a flame.
It's falling apart.
Okay, so that's a 0. Okay. Starting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pull it off. Flip it over. Definitely smelled some hair. The side that faced the fire certainly burnt all of the nap off of it, but all of the actual structural weaving is fully intact, and there's exactly 0 sign of any damage showing through on the back side. Nothing comes through it.
Kind of brushed off.
Yep, brushes off. You kind of just burnt the outer hairs. I can still see the weave.
My God, look at that. That's cool.
I would say it's equally as strong and as warm, and now even a little more fire resistant probably than its original. Weather wool whipcord. So this is a fabric that we're designing really for summer use. So we want it to be thin, we want it to be breathable, we want the air to flow through it, we want to feel that breeze through it. So if you're hiking a trail and you're sweating, we want that breeze to kind of cool you off, blow any moisture off your body. But due to that, it's going to have more oxygen moving through the fibers, and it's a little bit of thinner weave, and it's going to burn through. It doesn't support its own flame, but it burnt through.
Wow.
Starting. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The weather wool denim was, when we first flipped it over, it was actually perfectly white. It looked like it was going to be strong. I attacked it pretty aggressively, thinking it was going to be more like the jacquard, and it did poke through. I think it just got to that point where the wool was thin enough that it couldn't fight the flame long enough in order to create enough of a barrier. So the thicker your wool, the more fire resistant it will be. I do want to point out that the actual fibers in the jacquard weather wool the denim weather wool and the whipcord weather wool are all the exact same. So it has nothing to do with the actual wool itself. It is simply just the way that it's woven that plays such a difference. For the sake of scoring this round, and I think all the following tests, I'm gonna omit the thin cotton because I do feel like I want to get a good sense of cotton versus wool, because that seems to be how it's gonna play out in the end of this all. And I don't want to cheat cotton by using an average between the thick cotton and the thin cotton. So I'm just gonna eliminate the thin cotton from the test results. I'm gonna continue to burn it just so that you guys can see how it plays out and how it looks and how it reacts. But I'm gonna do a solid for cotton and just rate them on their thick, heavy-duty flannel cotton. So one of the things I learned right out of the gate with these tests was that you can't trust what you read, even when they're credited to reliable sources, because context is such a factor. So for example, one of the things that I learned in my studies was that the ignition temperature of polyester is between 700 and 800 Fahrenheit, and that nylon is ignition temperature is between 800 and 900 Fahrenheit. And comparing that to cotton, which was much lower at only 410 to 480 Fahrenheit, meaning if you read that, you would think that cotton is a much more flammable material than polyester or nylon. But nylon, cotton, polyester, cotton. I mean, according to these fabrics and this simple flame test with a candle, cotton way outperformed the polyesters and nylon. So, maybe if we're talking, a specific test that's a cotton ball, raw cotton fiber, compared to whatever this is in its raw form, maybe then you would get those results. But as Ralph loves to quote, he says, I don't know who originally said it, but if you follow the science, 99% of the time, it'll lead you to the money. So whoever's paying for those studies to tell you that nylon and polyester is more fireproof than cotton is, I don't want to say that they're wrong or that they're lying, but they're controlling the studies in a way to give their product favor. Now, I could have done that. There would have been a really easy way to cheat for weather wool, because wool holds moisture extremely well. And had I wanted to make wool way outperform everything else, I could have sat the wool over a humidifier for a couple days. It would have filled with moisture and then left all the other stuff, in a really dry environment. But just a way to demonstrate how even with a visual test, I could have staggered the tests to produce results in my favor. But we're not trying to do that here. What we want to do is give an honest visual. We're not trying to sell our product. We're trying to learn more about our product so that we can better advise customers, and more importantly, be really honest with people so that we don't affect someone's safety. So for test number 2, we are trying to simulate touching hot objects, maybe touching a burner on a stove, leaning up against a wood-burning stove that's been burning for a couple days and is super hot, or worst case scenarios, you're in a car accident or a house that's burning and you're touching hot metal. So when there's no flame involved, but an object is very hot, how do these fabrics respond to that? This one was a little tricky to be very consistent with. We did our best to monitor both the color of the steel, keeping that consistent, which based on the charts I was looking at, our temperature of our steel was kind of like a red that looked to be about 700 degrees Celsius. We also tried to keep a consistent rhythm, so the iron was going into the coals the same amount of time between samples. And then as far as applying pressure, it was no pressure applied, just the weight of the iron itself. So did our best to be as consistent as possible, but of course, this is not some official scientific experiment. This is just home testing. We've also changed our ventilation system now that we don't have to worry about a candle flame. We can get a lot more suction to shoot all of this fumes out the door. I'm also going to put on a mask because I can feel it.
Roll on camera 1, roll on camera 2, and go ahead. 1, 2, 3.
So cotton did a pretty good job. The fabric was damaged, but not completely burnt through until I applied just a light amount of pressure on the fabric itself, and then those brittle fibers all snapped. But overall, fairly impressed with the cotton. And as mentioned, despite me not taking the scores from the thinner cotton, we did do the tests of it anyways, just for visual reference. The biggest surprise, once again, was the cotton denim. It scored a 7 out of 10. It did have some dye leakage. I assume that's dye. It's like a kind of a greeny yellow stickiness. It kind of bled through, and there are some light holes coming through, but for the most part stayed fairly stable other than where I applied pressure on the fabric itself. Linen was completely burnt through, but because it did not stick to the tile, it still earned 1 point. The thin sample of nylon completely melted through. It got 0 points. It melted, it stuck to the tile, and it even curled up a bit. And it required scraping to reset the tile for the next test. So that means nylon that had melted to what would be your skin if you were wearing it. The puffy vest had the same results. The steel melted through remarkably fast and had a nasty smell and left a real melted mess to clean off the tile plate. You certainly wouldn't want that in contact with your skin. Well, this one caught me off guard a bit. I was not expecting this cloud of smoke at first, and I thought maybe it had something to do with the dye, but we also tested the weather wool denim, as you'll see shortly after. It also had the exact same cloud of smoke, so that must just be due to the natural hair fibers that create that amount of smoke. But I thought that was quite interesting. So while the weather wool jacquard did do a great job of creating its own kind of protective layer to protect the fabric, and for the most part not showing through on the back side, it did make the hair fibers brittle enough that I was able to break through it. So I ended up giving it a 5 out of 10. So the heat penetrated a little further through the denim compared to the jacquard, and did result in a bit more of a fragile fabric that was easier to break through in multiple spots. And I guess just due to the white fabric, it did show a bit more of a burn type stain through it. Weather wool whipcord. This one took a bit of a beating. It burnt through about 75% of the fabric, and it also left a little bit of residue on the tile. Acrylic was an instant fail. It melted right through, left a nasty burn on the plastic, and it required the tile being scraped off. So nothing positive to say about acrylic on the heat test. And it's no surprise that polyester was a very big disgrace. Just completely melted through. This sample, it literally burnt the sample in half, melted the sample in half, maybe a better word to use. And it was the only sample that actually took flame from the heat alone with no introduced flame. It would be the worst fabric to have melted on your skin, in my opinion. It melted thin and it remained almost sticky. I imagine it would be the hardest to separate from the skin if it was burnt on. You can see here we were actually struggling to remove it from the tile with a steel blade. So it would be almost impossible to separate from your skin. Complete zeros across the board for polyester. Although this fake fur did not have a label that specified what the exact breakdown of fabric was, according to my research, most fake furs is made from a combination of polyester, acrylic, and something called Moda acrylic. I'm not super familiar with what that is, but it's no surprise it reacted the same way that the other synthetics did. So the conclusion here was that heat is really what we need to be concerned about, more so than flame. This heat did more damage in 3 seconds than a flame did in 10 seconds to all of these samples. So something to be aware of, that just because something's not on fire doesn't mean it's not extremely dangerous. If you spend enough time around a campfire, you will know that every once in a while you hear that pop and some coals go flying. Now it might be someone trying to be helpful and bringing some rocks for a fire pit that are river rocks that have moisture in them, or just some wet wood. wood will pop and explode, and I've even had that happen in a fireplace in a house, having coals this size pop out onto a rug. So the idea here is to see what happens when these coals pop and land on a blanket or on your lap, what to expect and how long do you have before it's seriously damaging. So let's take a look. I did speed this one up just for the sake of moving this video along a little faster. I also did a little bit of blowing and waving some air just to try to get a little bit of an ember, because if you are outside around a campfire, there's generally some air movement and some wind movement. The results, as you can see here, were similar to what we're seeing with the other tests. So maybe it was the amount of fumes that I had been inhaling, but I forgot to do 3 of the samples. So I did those shortly after under similar conditions. So just quickly running through them, the cotton denim did burn not completely through, but again, became fragile enough that with a little pressure, it snapped right through. The jacquard fabric, similar story, smoldered, tried to protect itself, but became so brittle under pressure, it did break through. Similar story with the weather wool denim, didn't burn through on its own, but made it brittle enough that when you apply pressure, it does break through. Whipcord actually did burn through on its own without me needing to apply pressure. The fake fur actually supported itself, not too bad. Obviously, it looks pretty nasty from that side, but not a huge hole on the back. Nylon totally melted right through. Same with the polyesters. Melted through and shrunk the fabric. The heat pulled the fabric in around it. And then acrylic completely melted right through. So now I think an important point here is that whenever I do see these coals pop and land on somebody, people tend to freak out. They're jumping and doing some kind of jig dance thinking there's a coal on them and they're going to blow up in flames. And none of these fabrics took to flame. So you do have time. Now, that being said, I do believe that with the cotton, I could have blown that smoldering fabric, and if I had some dry grasses together with that, I believe I could have blown that into a flame. So even though it's maybe not means for dramatic panic, you certainly got to be absolutely aware, because an ember landed on cotton with some wind and some dry grasses could absolutely become a fire. And maybe in that case, in some regards, from a forest fire perspective or a fire to spread, cotton could potentially be the worst case. But in these tests, from what I'm testing as far as damaging to clothes and safety of a person, I think the synthetics are still the worst case scenario. So the next test is kind of fun. I wanted to see how the fabric protected our skin on a more visual level. So we wrapped all of the fabric over hot dogs and both analyze the fabric itself as well as any markings or damage or burns on the hot dog. And so let's get into those. Just a little reminder, accidents do happen. And so it's always good to be prepared, even though you don't think you're gonna start on fire. You never know when a little extra gas might be in that camp stove. Trust me, I know. So we set the camp stove to a medium heat. I certainly could have cranked it up much higher. What I wanted was just a little bit of blue flame, and ideally have the flame not quite reach the hot dog. Just get that flame hot, but not too hot and not too high. So it's a little combination between both flame and heat that we're kind of trying to test here. So the cotton churning caught fire, supported its own flame, and the hot dog was damaged, so I'm going to give it a 1. So the thin nylon melted in a hurry and was a complete failure. And then the nylon puffy vest, I actually had to pull it off in advance because it did catch flame. And just for the sake of safety, I needed to remove it and make sure that fire was put out and didn't burn too much. So due to not completing the test, it also received a 0. So nylon was 0s across the board. So the cotton denim actually surprised me here. After kind of earning a bunch of my respect, it really failed here. It caught flame, it had to be rolled out. And then also, when you inspected the hot dog, there was that dye that I talked about earlier, that really nasty, blacky green residue on the hot dog. So that's kind of concerning. I'm not sure what is going on there, but it seemed like something more than just the heat creating that effect on the hot dog. If someone can explain that to me and what is going on there, what that is, I'd really appreciate that in the comments. Linen burnt through, the hot dog was damaged, and it did support its own flame, so it certainly didn't do well. But because it was such a thin sample and because it did not stick to the hot dog, I still gave it 1 point. The Weatherable Jacquard really came out to perform here on this test when I think it matters most, actually protecting our skin. It showed that the insulating power of that Jacquard fabric is really fantastic. It had absolutely no damage to the inside of the fabric and no sign of any heat or damage to the hot dog itself. It did burn up the nap, in that self-defense mechanism we talked about earlier, but so I did have to dock a point for that. But overall, I think that the Weatherable Jacquard was the far superior performer in this test. The Weatherable denim, similar to the Jacquard, had a really great result in protecting the hot dog. There was no damage to the hot dog and very minimal sign of any heat penetration through the fabric itself. Although being a bit thinner, it didn't quite have that same insulating properties that the Jacquard did. Now, the Weatherable whipcord also performed pretty well on this one. You'll notice that I was rotating it a little bit, and that's due to this little whipcord sample was our last piece of sample material. I just had a small swatch of it that we cut up for these tests, and when we first started testing, we used this sample and ran it for 3 seconds, and then later when we realized we wanted to do it for 10 seconds, we had to use that same sample again. So it already had 3 seconds under the heat, so I was rotating a little bit, maybe trying to make up for the fact that it already had seen 3 seconds of heat. But with that being said, I still think it performed quite well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. When there's no room for the air to move through the fabric, it seemed like it did better. Having that hot dog as a backing seemed to be something that it was helpful to the whipcord. Polyester, of course, was zeros across the board. It dripped, it melted, it supported its own flame, it burnt the hot dogs. The thicker polyester sample appears to have protected the hot dog a little bit better, but that was due to me pulling it off the flame in the shorter amount of time because it was dripping and melting in my camp stove, and I just didn't want all that mess. So it got fails because it didn't complete the test. The fake fur took flame immediately, and although it wasn't detrimental to the hot dog itself, imagine wearing that fake fur coat like that, catching on fire, and how that would do damage, that flame burning up to your face and to your hair. It could be really nasty, so it also was an automatic fail. Again, I will blame the fumes of the environment. I forgot to test the acrylic, but I did later test it in a similar test, just putting the acrylic fabric around a candle and burning it over a candle flame just to kind of prove to myself that it would have failed this test regardless, and it could barely handle the heat of the candle and melted up and left a nasty black mark on the candle as well. So pretty confident that the acrylic under the same situation would have failed equally as bad as the polyester and nylon. For our final test, we went outside. This test was really to emulate the most realistic scenario, which is standing around a campfire, sitting around a campfire and having sparks, small embers blow, land on you, wind picking up and tossing a bit of the ash your direction. And I just wanted to see how the various fabrics would hold out under those circumstances. Of course, it was a little bit, again, difficult to be consistent as far as where the embers were landing, but I did my best to shoot sparks, ash in all directions and really overshoot on each side to make sure that I was being even, as well as I was rotating my sample board constantly through the test, just to try to make sure that samples on the top were not being favored over samples on the bottom. Let's take a look at that now. Okay, weatherwool whipcord, unscathed. Thick cotton, fairly unscathed. Fake fur is shot, it's destroyed, it's an absolute zero. Oh, acrylic, multiple burn holes in acrylic. Thin cotton's doing okay. This polyester shot, this denim's fine. That jacquard is fine. Weatherwool denim, a few dark spots. Now, I think this is, oh, and we got a coal landed right on the very top that seems to be making a little burn there. So obviously the white showing the burn marks a little bit more than everything else, but let's see, do they rub off? Yeah, it kind of just flakes off, but it is seeing some embers land on it. Multiple holes in this polyester. The puffy vest nylon, doing okay. That polyester shot, multiple holes. Linen's doing okay, and this nylon is doing okay. Nylon doing much better than polyester in this test. Okay, just to be fair, we're going to flip it upside down because I think the bottom pieces are getting a little bit harder hit. And we'll give it another go. Well, there's an ember land right on that whipcord. Sorry, right on the weatherwool jacquard, and it's doing okay. Okay, I think that got a pretty good beating. All right, let's break these down. Nylon, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 holes in the thin nylon. In the puffy vest, 1, 2, 3, 4 holes in nylon, and this one. All around, I'm actually fairly impressed. It didn't seem to catch fire, didn't hold its own flame, it didn't seem to melt, just got some holes. So not bad nylon. Linen, no holes all the way through. It's just got a few little minor specks on it. Polyester, absolute fail, just full of holes. This is polyester, melted, disgusting. And this is polyester again. Seems like where there was oxygen around the fringe, it just burnt up. Oh, we got a coal still on this weatherwool denim. So that definitely left a mark, but it did not go through the weatherwool denim at all. I guess a note here is that if you're going to be around a lot of fire, then maybe the natural white might not be the best bet for you, because even though it doesn't seem to burn or do much serious damage, it does darken the wool a little bit. Whereas this brown sample of the weatherwool jacquard is relatively unscathed. There is a little mark where coal had landed. In fact, there's 3 spots where coals landed and sat, but again, did not penetrate through the fabric and did not support a flame. It did pretty well. The denim here, okay, so it looks like it did catch on fire and it smoldered. When I moved the board here, I did actually notice this was glowing a little bit and it was moving its way across. So that, despite that fabric not catching sparks, it did, when it did catch, it smoldered, and that could be quite dangerous. So I got to think about how I want to rate that. The fake fur caught sparks like crazy, and it melted and did a lot of damage. And yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to be wearing that. So the acrylic holes all the way through it, completely melted. And this cotton did pretty good, just a few little small specks, but all in all, I'm pretty impressed with the cotton. And that cotton also did really well. A few little spots where you could see stuff landed, but I'm quite impressed with that. And the weatherwool whipcord, this is our new fabric, as I probably mentioned earlier. Unscathed. Again, it's black, so it's a little harder to tell, but there seems to be no damage. So obviously the darker fabrics hide any Any bird mark's a lot better than the white one. But all in all, I'm actually quite impressed. Obviously polyester, do not wear near fire. That one's nasty. Cotton, as long as you're careful, but it can catch an ember, as we saw here, and it can smolder and get worse. So definitely not something you'd want to sleep beside a fire with or sit and kind of relax long term. Careful. Wool, in this case, definitely outperforms everything else. And even the linen here, I see there's a little hole and it kind of smoldered over. So there you have it. That's the ember test. So I hope the main takeaway from these tests are A, that you have to be really careful with synthetic fabrics around a fire, and B, that despite wool being really great as a fire-resistant fabric, it is not fireproof. It is not protective gear. So if you're someone who's just going out to cabins, campfires, you're a woodsman, you're going to a hunting camp and you're going to have a campfire, really think about wool. But if you're going out to intend with the intention of being in fire, fighting forest fires, all that kind of stuff, you're going to be wanting to wear an actual personal protective rated type of garment. But I still am really proud to see the results that wool produced. I think that in combination with all of the other properties, the water resistant properties, the moisture wicking, the temperature control properties of wool, it really is still a miracle fiber. And I don't know, I'm constantly impressed by it. And I'm also constantly trying to understand it. I myself am doing these tests because I've been wearing weather wool since 2017. That's 8 years. And I question sometimes, like, am I buying into a hype? Am I buying into, like, I want this company to do well. I want to support them. I want to believe in them. But, like, what's the facts? And so I'm kind of testing my own conscious opinions in doing this kind of stuff, testing it in freezing water, testing it with flame, all the other stuff that I'm doing kind of behind the scenes is to make sure that I really, when I regurgitate outwards things that I've had come in my way, that I have filtered that through my own sincere beliefs and tests and firsthand experiences. So if you made it this far in the video, I want to thank you for sticking around to the end, and I hope that if you're not already layering yourself in wool when you head out to the bonfire or to the cabin for a weekend, that you seriously consider it. And on that note, bon voyage.